All right. I've been excited to have this woman on my podcast because I fell in love with her finding her vulnerable podcast, but that's like the least of her fame, okay? Christy Carlson Romano, everybody knows her from Even Stevens, Cadet Kelly, Kim Possible, child actor, started at 6. I mean, now she's a CEO of Podco. The woman's a wifey. She's a boss. She's a mommy. But like, I got down the rabbit hole like almost over a year ago about you. And I was like, damn, she like goes there and she's survived so many things. And now she's built this podcast empire. I was like, well, how do I become her friend? One, invite her on my show. So there we go. There we are. Christy, you're here.
Yes. No, honestly, that is a mom hack. That is a content creator mom hack because it is already so hard to find mom friends. And on top of that, the type of stress that a content creator goes through or a performer or whatever, like it's a very unique set of things. And so when you can find someone who like gets you, it's really kind of even more special, not to make the other friendships less important, but there's like a short understanding that we have of one another. Like we got to get the content, we got to do things this way. There's deadlines. And so we were talking right before we hit record and it's like, you know, I just came from volunteering at my kid's school. And it's something that for me, having not been able to do team sports and not being able to kind of show up a lot in my life, I'm so fully activated by this like mom community. And so to me, that really does matter so much to me. So I love that we're friends now.
Well, I also in my head bonded with you because you went to Barnard, an all women's college, and I went to Mount Holyoke. And I'm curious. What was your experience like at an all women's college? How'd you like it?
Okay, so Barnard's really fascinating because it's really interconnected to all of the classes at Columbia. Although I feel like when I went there, we were still in a very like male gaze, like McBling era 2000s. And so like really Barnard was called a lot of different horrible names, which I'm sure you guys got too, but like we were called Barnyard. And like, I mean, one year I was there and they actually did make a barnyard at a quad. And I was like, guys, just leaning into the joke isn't good. Like you don't do that. You don't make a barnyard a Barnard. I'm like, guys, you don't get it. They're making fun of us. But, you know, I think that like the type of women that went to Barnard, we really had this like archetype that we wanted to live up to of Athena. And there's like this statue of Athena in the front. And there's this like mentality of strong Barnard women. And I personally I went, you know, by the way, it took me 12 years to graduate.
Yeah. You were working,
left,
right? Like were you working in between or
yeah, I was fucking off half the time. Like I literally left and I did Beauty and the Beast, which was a legitimate opportunity, but I also wasn't having the best experience. And so when I left and came back at 26, it was because I hated LA and I couldn't I had a horrible broken heart and I just wanted to like escape LA. And so even though I had like some bad memories of going the first time straight out of Disney, I was kind of like, okay, let me reapproach this as a 26-year-old. But I was still very much an active drinker and I wasn't really focused on my studies. By the time I went back at 30, mind you, I was married. I had met my husband when I was 26 that year, that second time I went back. And it was a really positive experience. But by the time I got back at 30, I triple course loaded everything. I knew I wanted a film degree. I knew I wanted women's leadership. And I just like didn't worry about grades. And I literally within a year and a half, I was like done with it.
I love that. I mean, I went to Mount Holyoke, which is all women's, and
there's tea underneath that. Let's unpack it, Sarah. Go for it.
I was like depressed the whole time, and I actually had to go to Ireland my junior year, more because I always really wanted to be like a radio DJ and talk show host, and I don't even know how I ended up at Mount Holyoke, to be honest with you. I don't know. I feel like I went to like tour like the Seven Sisters school, and I was so inspired by this like women empowerment school, and I kind of had a lot of guy friends in high school, so I was like, I'm gonna bond with women. When I went there though, the women were so smart. I mean, I was the dumbest fucking person there. I was so stupid. No, really. And like, I ran the radio station. That's all I wanted to do. These women were like doctors, dentists, like they spoke 4 languages. I was like, guys, I'm trying to be the female Jerry Springer. Like I did not fit. Like that was really what it came down to. I didn't fit. I mean, it was great. It exposed me to so much because I grew up in Maine. It was my first
Yeah.
exposure to like living with women of different color and all. It was
Yeah.
but it was like I was not prepared for how like hard it was and how much I wanted to be a DJ. But it tipped off a lot of,
Which
to your
you
point.
did though. And I mean, like, just for you to even reach out and see me on a level that's not just the tea. Like, I think that's what's so great about the legacy I've been able to kind of a pivot towards is like, I don't want to just be like, oh, she's some fuck up child actor. It's more like, wow, she's bringing change to a broken Hollywood system the best that she can in her advocacy work. And like, there's a lot of undercurrents of things that I'm not necessarily getting, out there because I don't need them to be in the algorithm. You know what I'm saying? Like some things don't need to be on the hearts and minds until I try to actively be like, guys, can you show up to this? I'm fundraising for this, looking ahead program, which is part of SAG for the kids. So it's just kind of like, I'm trying to strategize my next moves so that I can obviously keep relevance alive for my content, but at the same time, like stay authentic.
So speaking of that, when you started first speaking out about your child acting experience, was it a YouTube video? What was the first thing that like popped off where you like really went there and you were like, I'm going to like, which is always very scary. What was the first real story you told that like got traction about your childhood acting career?
So that's a great question. I mean, I feel like now that I started therapy again, I started thinking critically about like, wow, like this has been kind of a wild journey for a few years now. This isn't just like, it feels like time's gone by very quickly. Once you find your voice, I think life goes by even faster. I mean, because you're not just stunned in a state of confusion. But so basically I wrote a Teen Vogue article and I chose Teen Vogue because Teen Vogue had been doing a lot of really cool journalism. And I thought that if I could make an impact, which at Barnard, when I went back, the women's leadership minor that I had, which is the Athena program, said, how do you make an impact on your community? So my senior project was to make like a documentary about child actors. And I was like, well, that's my community. Yeah. And so that was like the seeds of that. So traveled to a couple years later and I said, I want to write something because I'm struggling with people not really truly knowing where, if I was dead or alive. I was constantly on BuzzFeed articles about, where are they now? And it was like every week there was some new BuzzFeed article or some stupid article that was like, where are they now? And I mean, I think that I got frustrated enough where I was doing Comic-Cons and people are like, where are you? What are you doing? And so I was struggling at the time to kind of figure out like income and like setting myself up for success. So I think that I wrote that article out of needing people to understand that I was alive and that I was human and to demystify that brand for them. And I took a chance. So the Teen Vogue article was the first time that I let everyone know that I had a quote unquote private struggle. And from there, I think that seed kind of was embedded in the back of my mind, but I started doing like cooking content and very like fluff stuff for a while.
Yeah, just to get it out there.
Yes.
Obviously I've listened to a lot of your podcasts and read about you and followed you over the past year. And I'm curious, you talk a lot about like all these experiences you had that were so bizarre, right? As a child, like having your first kiss on camera. I mean, I was thinking about that. I was like, my first kiss was with this kid, Corey Blagden, when I was going into 8th grade. I mean, I can't imagine having it filmed. I mean, what?
Oh, yeah. So I wonder if that was Allison Stoner. So Allison Stoner may have said that her first kiss was on, because I'm guessing you probably follow her too, yeah?
Yes, I follow her.
Them. Yes.
Yes.
So Allison had said that, I think for me, yes, that was something that did happen, but it wasn't my first kiss because I definitely kissed a few people before 16. And yes, I had that normal experience of like, oh, it's like my friend of my parents and he's this guy. So I had sort of a normal experience. But honestly, when you think about intimacy and children, and then filming that intimacy. I have not unpacked that quite yet, but there's so many complexities to the implications of filming minors now that I am kind of trying to negotiate. Like, there's a lot of people that have zero tolerance policies on, like, don't post your children at all. But then I've even interviewed them. Like, I've interviewed journalists and other advocates of all that stuff. So I was like, guys, but when we take our Christmas photos, like, I really want to post those, you know?
Yeah, it's hard. It's right. It's hard for all of us, whether you're putting
Yeah.
your kids on YouTube or television or just even on your Instagram to whoever.
Yeah.
It's hard to know now where the boundaries are.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were 16, you're having what show was it that you were doing, like, that you were kissing on at that age?
So Even Stevens, my character, got a boyfriend, and then he was around my age. I think he was a couple years older. I don't believe he might have been 18. I don't know. But he was a decent guy and he was extremely professional. But I remember having a lot of anxiety about it. I was like, they gave me Altoids and I was like freaking out. And I was still a very shy and sheltered 16-year-old. So
Oh my God, I would have been too. I mean, just to even have a camera there. I mean,
yeah.
You don't even think about, like, how big those moments really are, when you're
Yeah.
16, like what they mean. Looking back, what do you think? Because obviously you came up, like, way before the Me Too, Time's Up movement. I mean,
Mhm.
all that, right? We've seen a lot of change in advocacy, still a long way to go. But looking back now, what was the most strange moment? Because I mean, you were constantly auditioning for probably mostly male executives at Disney for these shows. I mean,
Yeah.
was there ever, like, a really bizarre moment where you were like, now you're like, wow, I cannot believe they asked me to do that, or like my parents were okay with that in this audition? Like, what was there something that stands out?
Yeah, I think that well, a couple things. Even when I was before Disney and I was in New York City, we had to turn down this audition for what ended up becoming Devil's Advocate, because in the beginning of Devil's Advocate, the actress that got it is Heather Matarazzo. She's like a fantastic actress, but she had to recount what happened to this predator, and it was horrifying, the script. And I believe Allison talked about some sort of an audition they also had where they were, having to talk about being kidnapped and
Mm.
assaulted as a minor. And so my dad stepped in because he was a quote unquote protective Italian father, but really it's like, I think any parent that shouldn't even be questioned, was like, she's not doing this. And my mom fought him because she was a part of, already indoctrinated into sort of this like toxic Hollywood system of like, if she doesn't do this, we're non-compliant. And if we're labeled non-compliant, and this is a really great opportunity, like it became almost like the more my daughter's willing to do in an uncomfortable space, the less competition there is.
Mm.
And so for people to maybe not connect those dots, but say, well, how did they get there? How did they get to become a train wreck? As Allison calls it, like the toddler to train wreck pipeline.
Yeah.
And it's really by there's a lot of consistencies that I think as a group of people that are trying to advocate for change, we're all coming together and being like, okay, we all know we have a shared experience, but like, how do we actually do the work to show the statistics of this?
I'm curious, like, did you have any, like, resemblance of a normal childhood? Like, did you go to middle school? Did you go to high school? Did you go to prom? I mean, then were you acting in between, or like, was there just always a tutor? You never really what was your experience like?
So I didn't get famous with one job, aka like big break thing, until Even Stevens. And I had done the pilot at 14, but we got our first pickup day of shooting at my 16th birthday. So to me, I was already college minded, and I was kind of already the person that I would be. I think that's why people kind of know me and they're like, oh yeah, that tracks, that she's still pretty type A. And and but there was a long road to even get to the set of even Stevens. There was so much conditioning that made me the perfect person for that part. So I was burnt out for sure by the end of doing Beauty and the Beast by the time I was like 20. And so it's like, again, if you try to understand the fluidity of it or the linearness of it, it's a little hard for us to unpack. So sometimes people will be like, oh, when you're in your interviews, you're jumping all over the place. And it's like, yeah, that's part now of my personality. But I try really hard to get back on track. So for example, your question was I ever in
Yeah,
you
like,
either love me or you don't. That's the thing.
No. Very
Was there
transparent.
ever a normal a normal background? Yeah, pieces of it. So like I was luckier than most. My mom knew that education was vital for me. And so she made sure that I did go to college. Most people needed emancipation by the time they were 16 and didn't even want to talk about the word college. They wanted to just make they wanted their GED. So a lot of people would get their GED, and that was a big flex. Emancipation and your GED would be flexes, because then you wouldn't have, schooling hours, and you wouldn't have, but as I know Allison has said in their podcast called Dear Hollywood, a lot of people are lacking basic work level skills at that point and really can only be one thing after they grow up, or they don't have money management skills. And I mean, there's tons of these kids that are now hugely famous that I hope fixed their reading issues, but they were not literate. Like they could not truly sit down, write an essay, like get into college. Like that wouldn't have been possible for them, just based on the studio teaching environment is not really that regulated. Let's put it that way.
Oh my God. What's it, look, I came up in radio in DC, famously left, worked with this incredibly toxic co-host who unfortunately died from a drug overdose a couple of years ago. And, the environment there was, literally after I got the job, they said, congrats, it's not show friendship, it's show business. And they treated us like that forever, for 6 years. And it took me years to be deprogrammed from it. But I found I speak up to about my story. I've told it and had other people who have left that show come and tell their story. But there's a level of almost blacklisted when you do, talk about it, I'm wondering, I mean, Disney is huge, I mean, the networks, you've been vulnerable, your podcast has been vulnerable, you go on other shows. Do you feel like you're like, in a way, blacklisted from the industry now? Do you even care? Or do you feel like, no, you're not, like you can still say this and still be auditioning and working?
Wow. Okay. So that's a fantastic question. I think that for so long, I had the assumption that blacklisting was a real thing. But the fact is, when we see that Jared Leto is still a huge star and, mainlining at like ACL here in Austin, it doesn't matter how, like, granted, women are persona non grata way faster than men. But if you look at this Kardashian effect, there is no negative press. As long as I have an influence, that's all that matters. And who better than to direct and manage that influence than myself? So I am truly coming from a place of empowerment, in that you've probably already been able to experience it from doing your own thing and having dealt with that past toxic work environment, where I've been able to come into my own, and the empowerment that comes with that. Only few people can truly understand that, when you pick up the microphone and just start being yourself. And that's almost like you take the pill and you're like, I can't unsee this anymore. And so for me, I've been extremely grateful to my fans, and the people that have chosen to follow me, subscribe, support, and truly get, like yourself, like actually be listening to my content and using it. I don't expect to sell a ton of merch, or sell out theaters. Like that's not what my plan is right now. Right. But everything's going really well. So if I'm blacklisted, then that's great, because I just am fine. Like I'm over here making good money.
Yeah.
My sponsors,
podcast company. Yes. It's like,
but
this is great. Yeah.
Yes, but look, I think for a while I was concerned about it, but let me also tell you this. I don't dislike anything about Disney. I actually really love Disney. I love Disneyland. I love all the Disney movies. I love Disney, the place where you go watch the things that I'm not probably allowed to say much of. But I love all things Disney. And that's what I think the folks there are understanding about whatever I've said, is that I am not saying this individual and that individual and this is I'm not like whistleblowing, because this is every single network. This is every single SAG person that is standing up for themselves. And I've been SAG since I was, 10 or something, right? And so because of that, I'm really just the face of a larger problem. And I think that representation is resounding in the strike that we're currently seeing. Unfortunately, I don't feel like the strike is truly tackling the issue of mental health for children. And I think that's a lack of foresight for them, because this is a perfect opportunity to bring them into that conversation, because they pay just as many dues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So if you pay just as many dues, why are you getting treated? It's kind of discrimination when you think about it. And they don't have a voice, because again, their parents want to be compliant, and that's like that's their go-to.
What's it been like? I mean, you've told your truth, but I mean, you've had famous co-stars, you Shia LaBeouf famously, Hilary Duff. I mean, you've worked with very famous people, and you've also been truthful in your experiences with them or your relationships with them. I know you and Shia LaBeouf, I think at least last time I checked, don't speak, right? Or has he reached out?
No, he hasn't. Honestly, I think because so much time had gone by and we weren't really friendly after the show ended anyway. I just think that it was one of those things of like, oh, I worked with her. She's fine. If I see her on the red carpet, I'll be pleasant. But I just don't think that we were ever set up to have a friendship outside of work. And so that's why for so many decades, people asking me about him, I just figured, you know what? Let me do a video and let me put it to rest. And I think that just spoke volumes to the impact that the show and that the legacy of that time for Disney and all that had on everybody.
And how have you embraced that? Because on a much smaller scale, right? This radio show that I was a part of was so big in the DC area, and then it was syndicated. So like for years after, people would ask me about my co-host, and they didn't know like the toxicity. They'd heard rumors or whatever. And it was so triggering for the first couple of years. I'm like, oh, fuck, I don't want to talk about this person. I hate this person. I was so still angry and all these things. For you, like, is it, but now, I mean, this was 10 years ago that I left the show now. Now I appreciate how much people loved it. Like it was their escapism in the morning. They looked forward to it. They didn't know the back dynamics. And my co-host, it was sad what happened really, because he was so mentally ill and didn't get the right treatment that, he was hurting too. We just didn't know it because we were so young. So does it bother you? Like people continue to bring up these famous actors that you worked with or these shows, or now are you at a place where you're like, I'm cool to like, I get what it means to the audience, or is it in between?
Yeah. I think that it was I think that as people were watching my videos, I was healing, because for so long I felt like I couldn't speak my truth. And so because I just started talking like the camera was my best friend, I think people started to relate to me on a really human level. And so if people bring it up now, I think they kind of already know how I feel. Intuitively, I think they're like, oh, this is like her whole brand. I don't know what it is, because it's not like every single one of my videos has millions and millions of views. I don't expect people to think of me as a celebrity. In fact, I don't identify as that. I'd much rather consider myself as like a host and a podcast person and like a content creator, all those things now. But when people try to use this term of celebrity, it kind of gives me an ick, because I'm just like, oh God, that means like I'm not relevant enough, or am I on that BuzzFeed list again? And so it's kind of triggering in that I'm not interested in that. I think that there's so many nuances in our industry that you could be successful at and actually make a living and stay true to yourself and have a voice and, not work with people that are not good for you and stuff like that. Like you just having the ability to say no is huge.
I feel like Raven Simone recently, like she did a kind of like, if she was waving a magic wand, what the rules and stipulations would be for child acting. She said like she wouldn't allow any child under 10 to act. I'm curious, what would be your, like if you were running the SAG-AFTRA, our union department's child acting, like what would be your rules, stipulations? What would you like to see happen?
So Raven went on I think it was the Vial files. Is that how you say his last name? Nick Vial. And you would know, you're a reality girly.
Yes, yes. I love all things reality. I never listened to Nick's shows, but yes.
Okay. Okay, great. So
I just saw the clip and I was like, "Oh, that's really,
yes.
that's interesting." I wonder, like, if Christy
Well,
feels the same or feels.
I commented under Nick on that post. And I was like, this is fantastic. And Raven actually commented on another post I did, and she was like, hit me up because this is a big thing. Now, I haven't been in touch with Raven. I think I've actually reached out to her wife. And we haven't been able to link up yet about her actually joining this movement that I've been spearheading with Allison Stoner and a few other really great individuals, including the Looking Ahead program. So if people don't know about the Looking Ahead program and they're still listening because they're not bored by all this, the Looking Ahead program is 50% funded by SAG. It's SAG's only representation for children in the arts. And when you think about how much money Hannah Montana made, the studios, and you think about how much money any of these, things make, it shows you just how important these actors are to big business and how much merchandise flies off the shelves. You know what I'm saying? So it is really big business. And these kids are also the role models to children, right? So based on what they end up doing off of set, their mental health directly affects your kids, everybody's kids, because they're like, well, so-and-so made a TikTok, you know, doing something. And it's like, there's implications to all of it. We're all interconnected, truly. So when people try to say, well, they're just rich kids and that doesn't matter to me. The other thing is that they're not most of the time. And then for every child that you actually see on a TV show, there's so many more that aren't and that have moved away from their hometowns to live in LA and try to make it and are displaced from their families. And so this is what makes it a very complicated issue. It's a really interesting issue for anybody who's maybe had a social work background or has children themselves that are interested in being high performing children.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, I can't tell you, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, but now I feel like even more than acting, right? Their kids want to launch Twitch channels. They want to launch YouTube channels. They want,
yeah, Roblox too. It's all scary.
Are you totally against? Yeah. I mean, look, I'm from Maine. I go back. I mean, I have family members that have young kids that these kids are into esports and they want to film them. And look, it's enticing. It's enticing for me to want to put my son, because kids sell. They really do. And kids want to watch children. Yeah. So it's even beyond, TV now. I feel like now you can shoot your own kids show.
Yeah, it's new media as a whole and the implications of that. Well, and this is the problem is when you think about just how outdated this is why I'm pushing for us to do the statistical work. Because if you knew that 85% of young performers have mental health crises at some time in their lives, would you put your child into this world? If you knew that as a parent, if the person at the FDA or who was it that said that it was the Surgeon General suggested that people under 16 should not have social media, right?
Oh my God.
I think that was recent.
I even read a story. I think it was in Florida, a school for an entire day banned cell phones on all middle school and high school campuses. And like just in 24 hours, like the production, the happiness, the interaction was like the less bullying, like everything. Like, and they were shocked it changed in 10 hours. Like that's much.
Wild.
Right. That's how much this impacts kids.
Yeah. So it's all interlinked when you think about now every child can be a child actor if they have their phone and they launch TikTok and they go viral. And then next thing you know, they're Addison Rae, or next thing you know, it's like if they have access to a phone, they have access to fame. So the protocol needs to be revised immediately. And so I do think that this isn't just something that we're seeing on the sets of, this network or that network. It really is a community focused shift that's happening.
So what are your bullet point initiatives? Like, what would you like to see happen or you think is important for parents to know?
Oh, I appreciate you giving me a platform to talk about that. It's hard for me with it being so nuanced for me to be like, this is it, because we're not quite organized. But what I can explain to you is that I have had a coalition going with several really well-spoken child performers that are leading the charge with me, as well as some mental health, like their intimacy coordinators and stuff like that on sets. And they have some really great blueprints for how we can take things to set to kind of regulate set life. But I think it's more of a holistic community approach with the Looking Ahead program, which I'm on the board of, and now I'm helping them celebrate their 20th anniversary. And it's one of those things where we need to get the word out about there being this sort of like very underserved national community of child performers that has social workers on staff and like therapists, and they do non-competitive like chats, and then the parents can come and talk about Coogan law education and even new media. Like they have social media sit-ins and stuff like that. So there is a really great movement happening that already kind of exists, but it needs support, because all the people that come and watch my content, they're like, Christy, how do I help? How do I help? Look into the Looking Ahead program, donate if you want to. I think that I'll be talking more about it, but I don't know what to tell you. I think it's going to be hard. I think we need to go to the federal. I think it needs to be federal change. I don't think it's like, yeah, because I don't think this is just like, oh, SAG needs to wag the finger. I think like there needs to be federal laws that protect kids that perform and on sets in any state, because just because LA or California has child labor laws, these other states don't. So they shoot all around the country.
I might be getting this mixed up. I'm not sure if you said this or if I heard it from someone else, but do you feel like parents should never manage the kids, or are you like okay with some parents if they have checks and balance?
Yeah, I think I think it's very hard. What I think maybe if you heard me say anything, I said there's like a triangle. And so like, and I'm not doing that because I'm part of the Illuminati. I think that there's like a triangle where like you could either be
Tell us
like
about the Illuminati. Does that exist for kid actors?
That's all. There it is.
Is that
children and all that? Oh God. So there's the you could be a mom, you could be a friend, or you could be a manager, but like you can't be like any one thing. You'd have to like pick two. And you kind of lose out on. And so I felt like my mom was my friend and my manager at one point. And I was like, I've lost my mom, you know? And it was hard for her to be displaced from 3 other children. And, you know, she was dealing with her own drinking stuff. And it was just kind of like, I loved her and I could see she was in pain, but I felt like I was also the problem and the solution. And so I just think that these parents are being groomed to be compliant. And I think that's the worst case any parent doesn't even realize, right? So yeah, I think they need help too. I do. I'm realizing that I think that if that's important that they stay in the picture. You can't just take them away.
I mean, look, you have insight that most of us do not have. I mean, do you look at like Lynn Spears and Jaimie Spears, like Britney's parents? I mean, do you have some empathy for them? I mean, you know, in a way, like they were plucked from nowhere, Louisiana.
Right. Sure.
They come to, you know, Florida, you know, they go to Orlando, suddenly like their daughter, and they have these other kids and they're trying to keep their jobs. They don't know if it's going to work out. I mean, Amanda Bynes' parents. I mean, do you have like you actually went through it with parents that managed you? I mean, do you look at these parents with, because they get no sympathy right now, you know, I mean,
yeah, I bet.
Maybe Amanda Bynes' parents a bit, but I mean,
yeah.
Like, do you see them with a different hat on than we do?
Yeah, I think that anybody who's had a stage parent, even if they were a high performing child, right? So like I went to professional children's school in New York City before I went out to work with Disney. And we had Juilliard violinists and School of American Ballet, like very highly competitive, you know, dancers. And we had golf proteges, and we had all like the strangest kids come, but they were the best at whatever they did and in the world. And they would come, and then that school was a private New York school that would accommodate their work schedule so that they could actually get a degree. So high performing children is, you know, they have parents that are extremely singularly focused on their professional, you know, aptitude and success. And this is what I always say, and I'll back this always. Kids should have a relationship to the arts, at the very least arts, but whatever it is they're good at, they should have a really great, healthy relationship with something. And when money comes into play, it's when it really, it commodifies their relationship to their talent. And so when you have a really complex relationship to your talent, you learn to hate it. And so for me, I don't sing, I don't try to dance. Like I have such a high critic inside of my head that it's not worth my time sometimes to have to manage that and try to be like a sober adult. Like that's just not something that I want to take on.
Yeah.
So I just think that we have sort of like we have some scar tissue around us when it comes to that, if I'm being really honest with you. And so when we see other people like the Spears family, and we hear about the accounts of it, I was shocked when I read Jeanette McCurdy's book. I think that was one of the more extreme cases.
Okay,
But I
wait.
was also,
Who's Jeanette McCurdy? Who's that?
oh, you got to read her book, please
Okay,
do. It
tell
was
me,
a
what's the
very
book? Yeah.
successful book. It's called I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it was like on every single
Yeah.
best selling. And she's now got a podcast that's like #1 in the nation. And she was on some Nickelodeon show. And we've connected, but I've only done like a book review of her book. I haven't had her on my show yet. So basically, that was a really extreme situation of somebody's mother who was just completely like should have been, she's really awful, evil mom. And I can't even sympathize with that parent at all. But I do think growing up, we saw the extremes, and in our back of our mind, they're like, well, at least my mom's not that bad.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
kind of where you're at. You're so competitive with each other that you're not looking to each other for like community. You're looking at each other like, well, I'm better. So it's kind of rough. Community is the way to fix this, I think, for starters, is to make these kids actually find each other instead of like,
Yeah.
be isolated. Yeah.
It is so tough. I mean, yeah, I haven't read Britney's book yet either, but I'm
Me
like,
neither.
I feel like
Oof.
I will understand I look at Jaimie and Lynn Spears, and I'm like, look, these two, they didn't have any idea, I mean, are they like completely blame free? No. But I mean, they probably came to Hollywood and someone said, oh, I'm a conservatorship lawyer and you can help save her. You can see how like they thought things were good intentions, or they thought making her famous would change everything. And then, it didn't. Where are you
Yeah.
at? You've done a ton of work on yourself, clearly.
Not enough. I promise you, not
Well,
enough.
we're all a work in progress, right? Where are you at with your parents now? Like, do you have a relationship with them where you can go back and go, wait, mom, why did you do that? Or why, or you know what? I appreciate that you stepped in, but why didn't you think this was okay? Like, where are you guys at now?
Yeah. I mean, I've been approached to do a memoir for about a year or so. There's been a conversation about it. And I've really woke up today wondering if like how I want any kind of a legacy to exist for my daughters when they pick up a book that has their mother's name on it. And, do I want to do a tell all about all the guys that, wronged me and which producer it was inappropriate? Like all these different things are really great for people to read and the algorithm will reward it. But
Yeah.
I've played the algorithm game for so long that like I don't necessarily need that in the book. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of book I want to do. And in doing so, I've spoken to my mom who lives in Austin. And, recently there was some news that came out about my mom suggesting that I get breast implants.
When you were 18, right? Yeah.
I was 18. It was something that I think we had a conversation about. And, I did put it in my podcast. And I didn't realize, even though I put it in my social media, that it was going to be the thing that everybody chose to take out of this interview. You never know what they're going to pick up.
You
So
never
of
know.
course,
And I did. That was everywhere. You were the Daily Mail and
in the world,
the world.
my mom calls me. My mom calls me from that interview. My brother called me, actually. My brother called me and he was really disappointed. And he was like, why are you making this your business? And I was like, dude, this is my truth. This is the conversation that happened. And I don't think, we need to go further with this, but I understand this must be triggering for him. And so I'm not, sharing these feelings in a vacuum, like in a bubble. This is really, truly like impacting a lot of other people. And so I do think that's partially why some people don't speak up until they're in a place like with Britney. It's like, why wouldn't she start to speak up? It's only in her benefit to finally let everyone know who she really is.
Right.
So I'm struggling with what I want to do next with that. But I will tell you this. Whatever I choose to do, I'm showing up because that's a part of my sobriety journey too. It's like I don't make commitments. It's very rare. I'm not saying 100% of the time, but I try very hard to honor my commitments and the best that I can. So if I'm going to be authentic in a book, it's going to be because I really gave it some thought. So tricky.
It is tricky, right? Like you do have they're your family and clearly your mom has feelings about it. I mean, the story ended up being you did have the breast augmentation, right? And yeah, you did. Well, I want to get my boobs done. So I'm
But this is what I'm trying to say. It's like, it's totally
I'm like,
like
I
there's
actually want to get a boob job. So you did it.
yeah, it's
You did
fine.
it.
It was fine. It was the best decision I ever made. Honestly, it was really like, I never regretted it for a day. I think I might've mentioned it after I said that part,
Yeah.
but it was the clip that I chose to post that made the news. And so my mom's picture was all over page 6. And so it was concerning to people. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, this is kind of part of it. This is part of all of it.
I know. And so it sounds like without your family, somewhat, would it be participation or just like understanding you wouldn't go through with a memoir?
I will go through with a memoir. I just don't know the tone of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
is it going to be sassy, or is it going to be more like, self-empowering? Like, I would really rather people take more of like an empowering thing away that might even help future generations of people, like read it as a guidebook.
Yeah.
But it's hard to negotiate these things.
I know. And people do always want the tea, right? They want the
They
dirt.
want the tea.
They want the dirt, right? And that's why Britney's too has done so well, right? We learned all these things about she and Justin Timberlake that we thought we knew, now we know. I mean, it's like wild. I was also thinking about you because we just had the 1-year anniversary of Aaron Carter's passing.
I saw that.
He passed. He was supposed to do your show.
Not the day he passed. It was like a month before he passed. So he was on a downward spiral, in my opinion. And so basically I was concerned because he didn't show up and we were going to pay him to be there, which I never do with my guests. But I was looking forward, truly, truly looking forward to getting
Oh my
to
God.
know
Yeah.
him.
You guys would have had, I was going to say, did you know him? You would have a lot, I'm sure, to talk about.
I guess we'd met doing like, I did like a Six Flags tour with Raven, and I believe he was part of that tour. So like, I think he'd been in my back of my memory. Like I'd met him several times because when I was on the phone trying to book him with his manager, he was like, "Hey, Christy." And he was like in the car and like, so yeah, I mean, look, it was very sad. It was a very sad, humbling understanding of, when anyone who passes in the child actor community, I think we all feel it. And I think we could try to pretend like we don't. But I think that those of us who are doing the work or have been affected by the experience, I think we all kind of tense up when we see the whatever the tagline in the news. And it's just like, oh God.
Okay, one last question on this, and then I want to move on
Sure.
to you being like such a businesswoman. But
Sure.
what what is it that stunts child actors so much? Is it just what's like the biggest thing, do you think, right? Because you look at like Michael Jackson, right? Who never really so talented, but never really matured beyond like 13, really. I mean, the guy was like, and you see this, I feel like, in a lot of child actors, I mean, if God forbid they don't pass from like addiction or they have such mental health things. Do you think it's just like being hypersexualized? Do you think it's like a combo? Do you think more than anything, it's the fucked up relationship that you develop with your parents? Because there's just seems to be a level of that. Is there like one thing you would say is the leader in causing child actor distress as adults? Yeah.
I think it's them not having perspective. So a lot of what it is that they stay in the fame game and they stay in LA or they stay in the one place because that's where they're supposed to be. And so I think it's that they've never fully tried to step away. And I think that, you see it with like the Harry Potter kids, like Emma, God, I was to say Hermione, but it's like,
right. I know whoever the actress is. I know.
Oh my God. Why am this is horrible. She played Belle. I'm the worst human being.
No, I don't know. I never look.
I was gonna say Emma Roberts, but it's not. Oh my God. Cut this out.
No. Oh my God, please. My audience knows. I never get anyone's. I do a whole show with some like Emma Watson.
Yeah. So Emma Watson. And I kind of see sometimes that the British, like the famous British kids seem to have like, I don't know, they seem like more well-adjusted or something, but
that's interesting.
Right? Like it's interesting, but the kids that are kind of stuck in La La Land and kind of have to become something else almost immediately, and then they do become hypersexualized. I think that perspective is key. So the one thing that saved me was going to college. I think that it wasn't the best experience, but that's okay. And that it really taught me how to have some grit and some resilience. And so this isn't about being famous. It's about living your best life. And so I do think that the kids need to be taken at least for like a gap year and just like not be famous and not be working. It's like, these are little minds and they need to be nurtured.
You need the opposite of the Amish Rumspringer. You know what I mean? You guys need you need the away. And I moved to LA a year and a half ago, and I'm obsessed with Los Angeles. But I say to myself, if I had moved here when I was 21, I'd be dead. I'd be dead from a cocaine overdose. I would have been a prostitute. I mean, I would have been a sugar baby. I would have like blown everybody. It would have been awful. Like, because like what it's like to have fame. Like I've only experienced it on a local level in DC, and everywhere you went, you got free stuff and priority seat. You see how like that's magnified.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And you're young. I mean, it's
not good. You shouldn't. Yeah. You need to have perspective. And the only way to have perspective is if you don't have it all the time.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Did you always want to be a businesswoman? You now run Podco. You have multiple podcast shows. She's a pod queen. Were you always good at business? Did you want to do that?
It's funny because I had a really supportive crew on Even Stevens, and they always told me that, oh, Christy's going to do business things. She seems like such a business lady. And like I was such a burnt out mess for like all my 20s that I didn't ever see myself as somebody who could truly be a mom or like much less a house owner or business owner, anything like that. I just couldn't identify with that level of thriving. And so when my husband and I finally met and we decided to have kids and that whole beautiful evolution happened for me, it was so great to start working in social media. I had such a sort of like a baptism of like growth and like, wow, I can like truly like just be myself and that's okay. I can share what I want. And yes, there's some fallback on some of that, but I did that. I take accountability for that. And it's like, sort of, I think it's like what they call like a strong moral inventory or something like that, where you're like, well, I did talk about my mom and my boob job and like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm again, not perfect, working on myself, going to therapy right after this. But I'm happy to have launched this podcast company. This is our first year and it's why, but really, and you saw
a great job. It's a lot of work. Like, I'm also curious, like your biggest mistakes so far. Cause I mean, my show's 8 years old. I've made so many, mostly in paying, people who I thought were going to be great producers or marketers and they didn't do shit. Like I realized that most of the marketing is me, but anyway, it's like, that's my own bias. But I'm wondering.
No, it's not. It's not. It's the same for us. I think that that's part of it. It's like you need to hire lieutenants that can like truly guide. And it's so hard to find people that are willing to do that, especially with the way people kind of don't, they're not super hard workers these days. There's a lot of work ethic issues since COVID. And I think a lot of people are just kind of confused on kind of where to put their efforts towards. But again, I do think that it's hard because you want to pay people a livable wage. You want to be a fair boss.
You're still a small business. It's so difficult. Yes. Yeah. And you find young people that want to be paid this exceptional amount. And it's like,
but they also don't show up. Like there's young people. We've been lucky to have a really great young person in our social team that's really shown up for us. And she's in LA and loves LA. And so we've been lucky I do have hope for the future. Let me just put it that way. Because I do think that there are always going to be ambitious people out there. They're just built that way.
They're hard to find.
That way. They're hard to find. So I guess what it is when you find the right people, you have to take good care of them.
It's hard too, going from being an employee to the employer, isn't it? Like I found that it's hard for me to be a boss to people because I love when I work for someone, I chit chat in the office. I'm besties with everybody, but when I'm the fucking boss, it sucks. Like I don't want to be friends with any of my employees.
No, it sucks. It does. But I think so. Yeah, this year has been wild. It's like we've got 7. So we had like how many? We had Wizards of Waverly Pod, Ned's Declassified, Vulnerable, Big Name, Fuller House that we had, and
huge show.
So we had Fuller House and Wizards had to go offline because of the strike, and then Ned's, which is killing it, just totally killing it. They're doing their first live show next, I think it's like it's in November. It's like November 18th or something like that. And they're just doing so well. And then they were able to pivot to do something where they're talking about their lives instead of the TV show. And then Wizards got the okay to start up again. So they're starting up again. And then I think Fuller House with Dave Coulier, we're going to wait on. But the cool thing about it is that we're still building and growing in this kind of like gray area. And so many people are coming to us now because they see that we put money into these pods and the visual element. Like even you, like this is a beautiful set that you have. And it's like, you've got your shit together and you've got your merch. So it's
I'll
important.
send you a t-shirt. Not that you don't have enough. You're like, bitch,
I would love a t-shirt. No,
Like,
give me a t-shirt, please. I'll pay for a t-shirt.
Okay, wait, we only have like 2 minutes left. In 2 minutes, tell me, because I've been conned by so many psychics too, girl. I could.
Oh, no, you have?
Yes, I could relate to you on so many levels.
We're going to be friends.
Walk into Fox 5. I was a longtime contributor at Fox 5 DC. I had her walk in. She walked right up to me and she's like, you're going to LA. You're going to be in this big building. You're signing a very big contract. You need to call me. And I can't remember. She said something about there's something going on with your neck. There's going to be some injury. Anyway, I called this woman. Of course you got to pay before you get the reading, give us your credit card number, do the whole $200 or whatever. And then she goes, there's something with your feet. And, I don't see a building. I'm like, okay, I have been,
you're like, this is
one.
weird.
That was just one. I've been conned by numerous ones, but I love that you spoke out about this. Tell me in like 90 seconds about your con. It's just psychic experience.
So I was approached by somebody at the stage door when I was doing Beauty and the Beast, and I wanted some answers in my life because I was just looking for everything and anything. And this person just took me for tens of thousands of dollars. And I thought if I bought this like crystal, that the crystal would essentially like heal everything and bless my life. And I woke up after I gave her the money and I was just like, oh my God, what did I do? So I do think that there is a spirituality out there. And I do think that there are some people that can be mediums. I just went on a podcast of James Van Der Beek's wife, Annie Van Der Beek. Is it Annie?
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
James,
and that was
famous like medium, right? Or psychic. I'm not sure what he calls
James
himself.
is?
Oh,
is
no,
James
I'm sorry. Not James Van Der Beek, the actor. Never mind. I'm thinking of another one.
It's okay.
He used to be on Oprah's show. It was like James Edwards or something. Sorry. James Van Der Beek is the actor of the star. Okay. You went on?
Yes. Yes. And so I went on and her girlfriend are mediums and psychics. And so I talked to them about this. And it was really fascinating because I was like, guys, I just want to be very honest with you about how I'm sort of don't believe and like I've had really bad experiences. And so I do think that there's a spectrum of spirituality that some people are gifted. And if they're gifted, they have to deal with those gifts in a way that's like not authentic, but they have like a code. And so when people are reaching out to you and trying to get like big money grabs, I just don't think that's really valuable. I think like you have to make your own truth in life and
it's your own inner work. And there are people that help guide you for those inner answers that legitimately deserve money. But
yeah,
I always feel like if the psychic world really existed, isn't our destiny all written? And wouldn't they all have the same reading of us? Like, why do you go to a different psychic and it's a totally different reading? Anyway,
that's a good point.
You've got to come back. We have to talk about the Illuminati in Hollywood. If Scientology ever recruited you, we've got to talk more about your podcasting business. Psychics, Christy Carlson Romano. I've been a big fan and Vulnerable show I listen to, but you have many, many more. You can follow her on Instagram. Thank you so much for being on.
Of course, Sarah. Thank you.
Loved it. Love